Who would have thought? Oh, this is really beautiful to have you all here. Um, Very special. These are powerful, powerful times that we're living in. Uh, let's, okay, great. All right, so people are going to join us little by little. What we were just actually doing as a group is just taking a moment, to breathe. And I know for me, it's the breath, connecting with the breath. Like there's so much going on right now, right? And so connecting with the breath is a way for me, I know, to just ground the energy and get into my body, because sometimes the energy's all out here and it's like moving around and it's crazy. um so I really thank you ladies for joining me and taking a moment to breathe. um so I want to introduce my co-creator, co-sister, founder of Inclusive Conversations, Karen Fleshman. What's up, Karen?
Hi, Laura. Hi, everybody. How are
It's so great to see you.
you? If folks are joining, drop your name in the chat so we can see who's joining and where you're joining us from and your pronoun. Please put your pronoun too. I'm Karen Fleshman, she, hers, and I am joining from San Francisco.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for that. Karen, would you just tell us who you are in the world and what had you be here today as one of the women at the table?
Sure. So I am a single soccer mom. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an activist and also an attorney. I guess I can take these glasses off because I don't have to read anything. I'm 51 years old, so yes, I do need reading glasses. And I am an anti-racism educator. So I founded my company, Racy Conversations, in 2014 because before that, I was helping young adults of color begin corporate careers in tech. And I became a mentor to hundreds of young adults. And listening to their stories, I came to realize that basically everything I learned about race and racism growing up was harmful and inaccurate, and I am part of the problem. And I thought I was helping them, go into corporate work environments, but the work environments were actually very harmful. And
Mm.
so I decided to shift focus to changing work environments because I want young people to have awesome careers and great salaries. But I also, and I want workplaces to benefit from young people, but I don't want anybody to be harmed. And then after the 2016 election, I was like, holy shit. When I saw 53% of white women voted for pussy grabber in chief, I'm like, oh no, I need to really focus on white women and our behavior. And then shortly thereafter, I met Laura and we started to host these events, and we've hosted them all across the country. And this is our first ever online one.
It is, yeah. First virtual inclusive conversations, which is super exciting.
Yes. And look at all the folks joining
I
us.
know, it's awesome. It's really great. We have people tuning in from all over the country, from Oaxaca City, in Oaxaca, Mexico. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here. So I'd love to continue going around our circle so that you ladies know about the ladies at the table. Angela Del Sol, please tell us who you are.
Hi everyone. I know it's been as Lauren was saying, it's been a really long month and week, and this year has just been so challenging. So I'm just thankful that all of you are taking the time to be here on a Wednesday evening. I know we've been bombarded with information online, so thank you. Just a little bit of my background. I am originally from Colombia, and I went to school in Washington, D.C., where I grew up when I moved here to the United States. So I grew up around politics. I studied international studies with a focus on corporate communications. And then I started working in the arts and culture until now. I started my own creative consultant 4 years ago, consulting agency. And I work in a lot of philanthropy projects, working with indigenous communities all over the world. So I've been always between the intersection of art, culture, technology, and social justice. When Laura invited me to be part of this, I just said yes. I guess everyone is kind of looking for answers and having hard conversations. And as a Latina, indigenous woman, I think it's important for me to be on the table because all of these issues that we're experiencing right now are quite interconnected. So what we're seeing here in the United States, what finally people are awakening to, it's the reality. It has been my reality my entire life and my communities. And this is our bread and butter that, you know, right now I'm working on a project with 10 different immigrant girls from all over the world. When we hear immigrants, we usually have the picture of like a Mexican person that are horrible. I don't even call him a president. He's just such a lack of leadership. He's painted this picture of immigration, but you know, we're working with immigrants from all over the world, from Asia, from Africa, from all over the world, and we're all sharing the same narratives of resilience and of so much potential. So I'm very excited to be here today and just share a little bit of my work and most importantly, listen and learn from all of you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Angela Del Sol. We'll move on next to Emily Pinto.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you for organizing this and inviting me to participate. I'm originally from Florida, and I attended a women's college in Missouri, where I majored in fashion design and studied and minored in women's studies. People often don't think those two things can go together, but I disagree. Women's work has long been textile work around the world for many generations. And in minoring in women's studies, my awareness was really raised about intersectional feminism, and that kind of really sparked my passion for social justice as well. So after I graduated, I volunteered with a worker-owned weaving cooperative in Guatemala, and that's actually where I live now. So I am tuning in from the highlands of Guatemala. And I had for 5 years a social entrepreneurship business partnering with women artisans here, selling an ethical line of accessories in the United States. And now I actually work for a nonprofit, a book club in New York. And we curate nonfiction books. Some of our curators are Susan Cain and Malcolm Gladwell. And I just look forward to participating in this conversation and learning along with everybody else.
Thank you so much, Emily. Keisha Carter, what is happening? We're the closest, like in distance.
Yes. So first I want to say, Emily, I'm extremely jealous because I love Malcolm Gladwell. So super jealous. I don't know if you saw my face when you said that, but thank you so much, Karen and Laura, for doing this work and putting this together. My name is Keisha Carter, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer at a local nonprofit organization here in Rochester, New York. and I am a community activist and agitator, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion educator. So I work with community groups and other nonprofits and large companies, small companies across the country, and educate on diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of the different things that come along with that. So I pretty much take the community work that I do in that really organic, grassroots kind of space, and I translate that to what corporate America will listen to and how they can get that information in a way that they can really be active on. And I teach people how to have uncomfortable conversations every single day. And I love what I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keisha, do you mind sharing where you're based right now?
I'm in Rochester, New York.
Great. Awesome. And I'm in Buffalo. And Angela Del Sol, did you share where you are currently?
No, I'm originally based in New York, but I'm in West Virginia right now.
Nice.
It's a very interesting state because my family, they have a small cabin up here, and this is where I could find refuge after when the pandemic hit. It was very scary. I was near a hospital, and it was just really hard to be nearby the sirens. So I ended up coming here, and it's nice, but and it's beautiful. They call it wild and wonderful for a reason. I think it's a really understated state, but I'm surrounded by homes that have Confederate flags. And, you know, it's been 3 months of feeling safe at home, but when I go out, like jogging, I'm always very, like, I don't feel safe. So it's a really interesting setup to be, but life brings you to interesting places.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You know, there's a thing about safety, and it was something that I want to create here in this conversation. And Karen and I talk about this at our events, is creating safety. And I don't know about you ladies, but I've had some issues with feeling safe in this world, and it's something I've struggled with, and I've been working through. But what I realize about safety is that safety doesn't equate to comfortable, right? So like, to set some intentions for our time together tonight is that we want this space. This space is a collaborative, beautiful space. This is fertile soil where we're planting seeds that over time will grow. This is not a sprint. This is lifelong work that we will do this, we will be in this energy and this vibration until the day that we die. And I was thinking about, like, how do you create a safe space? And then I thought it was important to just presence that safe does not equal comfortable. And there will be things that we talk about here, ideas presented, thoughts and opinions that may cause you some severe discomfort, not only while you're here with us in this Zoom, but moving forward. And I know for me, and Karen has witnessed it firsthand, where I have wrestled with a lot of this stuff, and even just like recognizing that I have privilege. So why tonight's conversation in particular is we're using white privilege and allyship as the container. That's what the conversation will be around, and I'm sure we'll sort of veer and move and flow into different spaces. However, if we don't recognize one of the roots of how we stay separate and how racism continues to thrive, is until we get aware of how we're part of that, and some of the just human experiences that create a culture or a society that is racist, that is for some people but not all people. So anyways, with all that said, my name is Laura Hakel. Some of you know me as Laura Aisha, and I am super blessed and grateful to be here with you. I have worked independently for many years. I'm currently in my first full-time job since my mid-20s, and I specialize in sales and new business development. So that's what I do for a living. However, I'm creative as well, and I write and sing and speak, and I love travel, and I love people, and I love community. And so one of the inspirations that brought Karen and I together is that we wanted to start to have these conversations so that ultimately we can build community and support and come together, because I know that we're stronger together. That's something that that's a value that I live by. And then also I just realized that, man, I've got a whole heap of blind spots that I'm not even aware of. So we chose to launch this project. So I'm really grateful that we're all here together. I'd like to, kick off this conversation. But before we get into that, what I'd like to do is take a moment, and we're going to do just a moment of silence and just hold space and the energy for everything that we're experiencing right now in the world. So wherever you are, as long as you're not driving or, or somewhere that it's not safe to do so, just put anything aside that you have in your hands, just take a moment to just free up and, feel your feet on the ground or your bum on the ground, wherever you are, or stand up or move around. And we're going to take a moment of silence here. I will let you know when the minute is up. Let's start. All right. Thank you. Thank you for doing that with us. Deep breath. I want to welcome everyone to the call. For anyone who is just joining, feel free in the chat box to give us your name, tell us where you're tuning in from. You could even give your pronouns. I'm she, her. And let's kick off this conversation, ladies. So first of all, I want to just check in. How are you all feeling? Who'd like to jump into that question? Just a temperature read.
I'll start. On the one hand, I feel worried. And on the other hand, I feel hopeful and incredibly inspired to see young leaders take the bullhorn and lead the revolution. And this is something I've wanted to see my whole life. And I'm so grateful to be able to see it, to bear witness to it.
Yes, Angela Del Sol.
Yeah, I am very worried. This past week has been really stressful, many sleepless nights, and yeah, I'm very worried because our attention seems to be very much controlled by the discourse that we have in our media. And I am afraid that after a few weeks, we're gonna go back into our old world, because this is not the first time that I've seen people march down the streets. I've been marching myself down the streets for 4 years now for many different causes. And as much as I think it's a great way of showing and speaking and inviting the entire world to listen in and have these conversations, I think it's going to need a lot of strategizing and organization to make this a very tangible move forward. And I am very afraid of the power that our president is putting into effect right now and how people are not necessarily questioning it. We just held elections yesterday in places like Washington, D.C., where my family is from, and Maryland and other states, 6 other states, and we saw how voting oppression is happening. Many people did not receive their ballots on the mail because our president has been pushing and has been in war with the postal service. So I'm really worried, I feel tons of hope, and I'm really thankful that people are finally awakening to the plight and the hardship of not just the African American community, but all the brown indigenous community that have been on this. And I do want to honor our African American community in the United States because they have paved the way for immigration, for all of us to be here. And I think that we need to acknowledge that. And there's just a lot to unpack, and I know it's exhausting. It's like really exhausting to talk about all of the things that we need to cover, but I'm very worried that this will become another Me Too movement. Not to say that it wasn't powerful, but I'm just saying that we need to focus on the long-term thinking post this, meaning a month from now, how many people are still going to have these conversations?
I feel, and this is Keisha again, pronouns are she and her. And I feel a little like Angela in that I don't know where it's been so emotional. And I think people are emotionally exhausted right now because there is so much that keeps getting piled on top of existing things that are already there. And I feel like the conversation may go, it's either going to go one of two ways. It's going to go where people start to go back to their lives and accept what's happening. And then, or it's going to go in a direction where people start to try and live and continue having conversations, maybe in smaller pockets, but then something else will happen. And it's going to be, there's only so much that a person and a group of people, a community can take. And it's going to be like a powder keg that is going to completely blow. And it's going to be really, really bad. And that is my fear, because if it gets to that point, then it's so much more difficult for anything to really affect the change that we want to see. I personally am feeling, I've been through every emotion possible in the last couple of weeks. And it is very difficult right now being a person of color, and then being a person of color who works in a professional environment, being a person of color who works in a professional environment, who also is an activist, and then, it goes on and all of the hats that we wear. And so for the last few days, I've not been able to differentiate the different parts of me. And so at sometimes all of the hats that I wear have been on at the same time, including being a mother of Black children, being a wife of a Black husband, and being a part of the community, being one of the subjugated, and so all of those things, to the point where at some point, I literally Monday just checked out and I said, I'm not answering emails, phone calls, text messages, anything, not going on social media. I have to take that break and indulge in some radical self-care, because I personally, it was either explode or implode, and I did not want to do either. But I am at the point right now where I am absolutely okay having those pissing some people off on social media, where I've played a little nicer in the past. At this point, my alter ego has come out. I am in most of the conversations I have online, I am not Keisha, I am Kiki, and this is Kiki. They get all. They get all, and I take it back to my colloquial terms. They get all the smoke. I don't even care anymore.
That's great. I love it. I'm like, bring it. Because, that's part of the thing with white people. It's like, I'm going to make some blanket statements here. I'm going to totally up this up, half of it at least. So, part of me doing this is to just do it and not knowing all the things, right? So, man, I know I can be so sensitive, and like, ooh, ow, oh, that did, oh, is that me? Like all the things. So I love that you're bringing it. Because we need to, white people, look, we got work to do.
Listen, yeah, I am, and I apologize in advance for my language, but I have no more fucks to give.
That's 100%.
Yeah, we support you in that full on. Because so part of the thing about white privilege is that I would venture to say that there are many, many, many white people that don't even know they're privileged. It's like a thing that it's like, you have to really start to get that awareness of what privilege is. And it's privilege to be able to just be like, I'm not going to fight for, Black and brown people today. I've had enough of that. I'm going to go on vacation and whatever. So let's dig in just a little bit to the, the white privilege topic. And I'm curious I know where my journey started in unpacking that. Emily, would you talk a little bit to when did you start to understand that you had privilege because of the body and the family and the community that you were born into?
Good question. I'll just say that, privilege is so pervasive, and it encompasses so many different things that we don't even think about. Actually getting ready for this little conversation here, I put in, I've got these little tiny hoop earrings. I see Laura's got her hoop earrings on. And something like that, is something we don't think about as white women, but, hoop earrings are actually, associated with Black culture, and Black people have had to fight for the right to, wear their hair naturally, to wear hoop earrings, to wear, whatever they want that expresses their culture. I think there, are a lot of white people that would never even imagine that something as simple as wearing hoop earrings and maybe wearing them on the job, wearing them in a professional setting, you know, that we're not going to be looked at as anything less than we are, whereas maybe a Black woman or other women of color have to think twice about how they present themselves, especially in scenarios, you know, in settings where they want to be taken seriously, which is all settings, of course, but I mean, I guess specifically in the workplace, in an educational setting, in school and university, whatever. So, but where did I first become aware of that? I mean, you know, like I said, I minored in women's studies and was really introduced to, you know, a lot of radical Black voices, maybe as part of that. Bell Hooks is a great example, Angela Davis. And so I probably really started to think about race then, but really going back to my childhood, I was part of a gifted program in the public schools, and the gifted program was put in the predominantly Black schools in our county because, you know, of course, those schools, they don't get as much money, they don't get as much funding. The education, you know, probably generally isn't as good, and test scores are lower because of that, and just because of a lot of stress in the environment too, of course. And so I actually attended predominantly Black public schools for elementary school and middle school, but the gifted program was predominantly white. We had 2 Black students when I was in elementary school. We had 2 Black students, and then when I was in middle school, we didn't have any. We had an Indian, and then, you know, India, and then white people, and that was it. So I think as a child, I really, you know, I started to think about how it was weird that you know, in all my classes, it was just white people, but then I would go to PE, you know, or lunch, and it was all Black people except for us. And we were, you know, I saw how we segregated ourselves out of just pure comfort in the settings where we might have been mixed in, like lunch or PE. And, you know, I just kind of saw those dynamics, those sort of race dynamics play out. The Black students saw us, and they knew that, you know, we were in this program that they maybe didn't even ever, you know, were never asked to test for. And we were separate, and, you know, it's really wrong how it was like that. And continues to be like that, I'm sure, today. So, but all of that, you know, really got me thinking about these types of things, I think, maybe from a young age.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up in a white middle to upper class neighborhood outside of Buffalo, New York, and in my elementary, middle school, high school, there were always only a couple of Black kids. And I left home at 16, and I got in some trouble. I ended up being in Louisiana for 10 months during that time. And for a couple of months, I attended an all Black high school. And that flipped the script for me. It was like, wow, okay, this is a totally new experience. And, you know, perspective is a gift, right? So like when we actually get some perspective on life, and that changed me forever. Just experiencing being the different one, experiencing being picked on and teased and bullied, and, you know, because I was different, you know, I was one of a couple of white kids in the school, and it gave me a heap of compassion and empathy that I don't think that I had before, because I just didn't even have a touch point for it. So how do white women start to recognize their privilege? Who'd like to take this on? Karen, is that you?
Sure. You know, and I'm kind of struck as you're talking, even going back to what we were talking about a little bit before about safety. And I'm writing a book right now, White Women, We Need to Talk, Doing Our Part to End Racism. And I've had the great honor of being able to interview some of the most amazing women of color activists. And two things that really stood out to me. One was Desiree Attaway said to me, white women are physically afraid of Black women. And I think that's true. I mean, I recognize it in me. And the first time that I had a Black woman boss, when I walked in and saw her, I had such a strong image in my head of what a boss looked like that I literally was like, you know, my mouth gaped. And so there's that. And also Linda Sarsour said, white women confuse comfort and safety. And we think that we're safe when we're nestled in with the patriarchy. But actually, the patriarchy is harming us. Where we're actually safe is when we're with Black women, when we're with women of color. And even in an environment where we may feel intensely uncomfortable and intensely what's the right word? Triggered or some kind of emotional, like, I'm afraid that I'm going to provoke some kind of response. We still hold so much power, including that we can just get up and go out of that space, right? We don't have to stay there. But we're so like, we feel like we're unsafe there, even though we are actually so safe all the time because we are shielded by all that privilege. And thinking about what is happening right now, where you see, I mean, I've been really, really inspired to see the white women lined up in Louisville, Kentucky, you know, in front of the Black protesters.
Amazing.
Police, you know, and that's
would you just, because some folks may not have seen that image, would you just explain it again, the protest? And
so it's an image of white women standing side by side, and they are the police are confronting them, and they're shielding the Black women activists in Louisville who are out there protesting for Breonna Taylor. And this is something that, you know, I've never seen. I've never seen white women put their bodies on the line in that way. And this is something that we have, white women. So we have so much fucking power. Okay, we make up 42% of the electorate. White men only make up 33% of the electorate. I'm talking about 2016. Black and Latinx men and women combined made up 20% of the electorate. And through 2028, white women will continue to be the largest voting bloc in something like 20 of our states. So one of the things with privilege is we don't feel like we are ever responsible for the other members of our group. We think, oh, I'm just an individual and they do what they do and I'm a good person and I'm a nice woman and I you know, but we are responsible, white women. We are responsible for Amy Cooper. We are responsible for all these other white women. And the only ones who are ever gonna persuade them to change is us. And we need to be out there talking with the women, you know, in West Virginia who have those Confederate flags hanging in front of their house, and talking to women who didn't vote in 2016 and trying to engage them and get them to change.
Thank you, Karen. Keisha, what's on your mind?
The protest in Louisville, the white women the image is wonderful. I love what they did. They did not do that on their own. The Black Lives Matter protesters actually said to them, if you're going to be here, make yourself useful. She put herself in between the police, and they did it. So I do give them all credit for doing that. And so we want to get to a place where we have white allies who think about that on their own. So I'm not discounting at all the fact that they did it. When we get to a place where we have white allies who do that on their own, that is the most amazing thing. And I want to say, so here in Rochester, we had protests over the weekend, and I have a 23-year-old daughter, and she and my 23-year-old niece went down before my husband and my son and I were able to get down there. And when we got there, one of the things my daughter said is that the organizers here said the same thing to all of the white people that were there, and just said, hey, white people, if anything, this was during, because I'm sure there were a lot of protests over the weekend that started out very peaceful, and then they turned into something different. This was during the peaceful portion. And my daughter she said she was so emotionally overwhelmed in such a positive way when she saw two white women near her, and they heard that directive, like, if this starts to go left, white people, we need you to put yourselves in the gap. We need you to stand in that gap for us. And she said she saw two white women, and one of them said to the other, wait, what'd they say? Because she couldn't hear very well. And the other one said to her, they said, we need to shield all the Black people. And she said the first one goes, oh, okay. And she's like, it was that whole thing, like when you're just talking to a friend, and your friend's like, wait, what movie are we going to see? And you tell them, and they're like, oh, okay, no problem. And she was like, oh my gosh, because when she heard the first part of the conversation, she was like, oh, come on, don't make me have to say something. And she was like, when she was just like, oh, okay, and just they kept moving and shouting and holding up their signs, like that was what they were there for. And that was a great thing that she got to witness that in person. I felt so thankful for that. And I think if you don't ever have to think about how you are going to be accepted based on any part of your identity, that is privilege. If you get to walk in who you are at any given moment and never have to think about what you are going to do based on, especially if we're talking about white privilege, based on the skin you're in, then that is that privilege. If, I think about when I walk into a board meeting and I look at where I'm going to sit, and from the door to the chair I sit in, there are 8 million thoughts that go through my head, because I have to think, if I sit there, then people are going to think X. If I sit there, people are going to think X. Where other people get to walk into the room and they think, oh, I like sitting by the window, I'm going to sit there. And that's it.
That's powerful. It's like 1,000 things a day that I never even consider. And, that was something that I wanted to just share about, is where does privilege show up in our day-to-day? How does it show up? Where do we start to see it? And I was sharing how a friend of mine who's white was out and about last night, going from point A to point B. We have a curfew here in Buffalo right now. And they said, yeah, well, I drove by the police department and there were a couple of cops there, but, nothing happened. But I wasn't really, worried about it anyways. And I was like, that's privilege, it's privilege to be out after a curfew when there are, big protests and some rioting and looting in different areas going on. And you can go out and be like, well, it's past curfew, but I'll be fine.
Listen, I live in a suburban neighborhood with no streetlights, and it is dark as heck. And I had to leave my house last night at 9:30 to run and grab something. And when I pulled out of my driveway, I thought how afraid I was. I was like, oh my gosh, it's dark. Like, I don't know, like being out of in my neighborhood by myself. And so I'm in my car, and I pulled out, and I was like still looking all over the place. And I turn as I'm pulling out of my driveway. Here is this white woman walking down the street. It is pitch black. I literally could see her blonde hair and her peach sweater. And she's just walking down the street. And like, I could not tell you what this woman looked like. And I was like, wow, not a care in the world right now, where I am pulling out of my own drive. I don't even know if this woman lived in my neighborhood. I'm pulling out of my own driveway, scared out of my mind. And she's just walking down the street. She's perfectly fine. So, you know, big differences.
Yeah, and I think that right now, because of where we're like the moment that we're like focusing on these like very subtle experiences in our lives, and how we've experienced privilege or racism in different ways. And I think the key point is responsibility. So I think that everyone has levels of privilege, because it's really a spectrum. Like even if I was born with this skin suit and this beautiful fluffy hair and like a very long name, it comes with a lot of privilege in many ways, and also with things that are not received the same way by the world. And I think that to make these type of conversations productive, in my opinion, because we can spend hours talking about how, like, you know, I was driving and the cop didn't give me a ticket and so forth. Like, there's so many of those stories. And I think that to make this more productive is to ask ourselves, how are we going to use the privilege that we have in our lives right now to change that? Because I think everyone that's in this conversation, that's on Zoom right now, I like to think that there's something in their lives that they're able to give to not only this movement, but to the world. Because I think this problem is not just in the United States, it's a global issue. I've had the fortune of living around the world. I lived in France for a while, in Paris, and I experienced firsthand racism because people thought I was Muslim. So I've actually experienced racism in many different countries outside of the United States and in my own home country, because I'm still not by definition white, and by that I mean how our colonizers' image of how we should look, because that's how media shows to us, like the same stereotype. So what I would like to challenge you guys is to think about your own responsibility in this movement, and how are you actually going to tangibly say, okay, I'm going to mentor someone that needs it. Like, who can I mentor right now? How can I open up my network? And like all of these amazing people that I know, how I open up this network for people that are talented, that are hungry for an opportunity, for a breakthrough. How can I be the angels to them? Right? And I think that that's a productive way to talk about privilege, because to be honest with you, after the week that we've had, like me sitting here hearing about like that, it makes me really angry, because I feel like we like know this, and it's a little annoying that we have to tell you guys. It's like, no, everyone needs to go home and do their work. You know, it's like, don't ask me how I'm doing. I'm amazing. I'm thriving. Like I'm resilient. Like I was born for this time. I'm fine. How are you doing? You know, like do the work, like feel uncomfortable, because this has been, you know, the fact that we have children in cages right now in our country, and no one has questioned the humanity of these children. Not one person has talked about these children. How did we go by with our beautiful lives, go to Starbucks, get our matcha? The woman that's serving us our matcha, her family has been separated by the police. You know, the indigenous women in this country have been killed by the police. So this is not new. And I'm glad that, and like, welcome to our realities, to everyone, like welcome to our struggles. I hope that you're here to commit for life, because this is not going to be an easy hashtag, an easy black square on Instagram, or a one-time donation. Like this is something that your children will benefit from. Like, how uncomfortable is that I have a 3-year-old that when she goes to school, she's gonna be taught to hide from guns. Like, when did we become so numb to like the real things that matter in our nation, in our world, to not even go all the way? It's like, commit to fucking something. It's like, if you care about gun control, go all the way there. if the killing of 25 children didn't move the mothers, the white mothers, the Latina mothers, the African mothers, all the mothers to go and do something? Like, why? Because right now I feel like we continue to focus on the symptoms and we're like pointing fingers at the cops. It's not the cops. The cops are so much similar than all of us. They don't make more than $70,000. They have families to feed. These men have been trained like that by a system. So we need to be very careful how we're talking about these issues, because the more we continue to pointing fingers and not really looking the few families that are controlling our news, that are controlling the food that we eat, everything that we consume, we're just running in circles thinking that we're doing something. So that's my message on privilege. Like, with privilege comes responsibility. So there's not like a spreadsheet where you're gonna find this. It's like, you have to look into yourself and say, okay, because I look like this, I'm gonna go and stand with my friend that looks like that, and we're gonna have these conversations. I'm gonna teach you how to enter some sectors. You know, I work with nonprofits, and I'm noticing, right, like fundraising is really difficult. Like, when I look like, when I put my hair like, I have to like put my hair back, I have to straighten it, I have to do the look, you know, and it's like, why? Why do I have to spend an hour trying? Like, no, I saw I grew up seeing my mother straightening her hair, and like, God forbid we get tan, you know, like, because I look pretty pale, but I actually get pretty dark, you know, but if you're dark and Latino, you get extra discriminated, you know. So there's levels to this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I am so glad that you spoke up, because there are levels, right? And the first level is just to be aware and to be willing to be aware, right? So you can't, like, for my estimation, you're not going to change shit if you can't even get with, like, oh, I'm privileged. Oh, duh. You know, like, okay, then what? You know, so then, yeah, how do I use that? How do I use my resources? How do I start talking to my people? How do I choose an avenue? And I think, you know, one of the things that I get overwhelmed by is there are so many avenues to choose from, right? So where do you make the biggest impact? How do you take all the gifts that you've been given and actually create something or make something move? And I think that everyone, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah. You want to finish your thought?
Well, just, you know, I think, you know, we're all doing that, you know, and everyone who's joining this call, we're all doing that in our own way. And then how do we get more aware? How do we expand our capacity to take a stand and to really choose what we're taking a stand for? And
Totally.
Be an ally, be a proper fucking sister, you know, like, no bullshit, and really be that. Stand for our communities, stand for our sisters, stand for the people who are not privileged like we are. How do we do that? What do we do?
I think that is going really deep into ourselves, because I think right now we're getting so caught up in in the color of our skin. And I think that we need to drive it back to our own human experiences. And I think all of us, especially maybe the 5 women that are in this, you know, on the screen right now, I'm sure that all of us have experienced a level of sexism, and we have felt a level of unsafety in our lives. And I think that versus trying to look for our differences, we need to start grounding into our common values and into our common struggles. Right? And I know that the struggle from, let's say, you know, a suburban mom and me are different to some extent, but I like to believe that if we're doing that inner work, I think all of us have a level of trauma that we can all deal with. And I think that the more we all deal with that in our own beings and then in our own homes, then we can actually truly go and fix that into our families, into our world. Because the family nucleus in the United States is broken. You know, when we're sending our elders to to elder homes to die, and like we see lifetimes, like there's expiration dates today. How can we expect to fix a society?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, there's something about just awareness and perspective, right? And so I can only speak from my own experience, and my experience is that when I was 16 and I was in a halfway house in Louisiana and I went to an all-Black high school, I actually had an opportunity to experience being a minority. I'd never experienced that before. That gave me perspective, you know. When I first went to Senegal in West Africa, and I went to the village, and I experienced a community that I'd never experienced, that level of community and connection, where everyone supported. Like, it was like there were the people who washed the clothes, and the people who did the cleaning, and the people who cooked, and the people who took care of the kids, and I'd never experienced that. And when I arrived home and realized that I was in a way too big for me and my daughter apartment, and it was cold, and I was alone, and I was going to be alone, and I was going to have to just fend for us, the two of us, you know, it was like, holy shit, you know. So, but I, you know, from my own perspective, you know, I needed to experience those things in order to have a point of reference, you know. So, so I really appreciate your energy and fire and everything you bring in, girl. I'm so grateful you're here. Emily.
Sorry, jumping in. I think the challenge is, you know, that most white women are not going to have an experience like that, Laura. And so how do we get white people who are never going to experience what it's like to be the minority in a situation, or who are, you know, maybe never going to travel outside of the United States, how are they going to develop that empathy? How are we going to inspire that empathy in, you know, our circles and everybody that we know? Which is a genuine question. I'm asking.
Yeah,
I think, you know, we're all recommending books. We're all, you know, I think it's really important for people to, you know, experience as much as possible people of color, you know, Black people's experiences through all of the mediums that we have available to us, like reading, like listening to a podcast, like listening to real, you know, live humans in real life, like connecting with organizations, connecting with Black Lives Matter, you know, but how are we going to keep inspiring people to do that once this moment has passed? Karen, any ideas?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of zoning out in the chat. No, I really think that conversations like this one are so important. I mean, I love a good protest. I've been protesting since I was in, you know, high school. And I live in the Bay Area, where we're like, oh, something happened, let's protest. Like, that is the first thing that we do. But I think in addition to the protest time, we have to sit and build relationship with each other. And it's like the Panthers, they would have a barbecue after their meetings and after their actions, because they wanted people to have that time to break bread and to really build community. And so some of the inclusive conversations that we've hosted were like in DC on the day after the Women's March, or in Austin, when folks were gathered there for South by Southwest. Like, we want to have these intentional times to build relationships with each other. And that's been one of the best outcomes, I think, of these conversations, is that people met people that they otherwise wouldn't have met. Because I don't know about you, but here in the Bay, like 9 times out of 10, if a white friend invites me to something, everybody there is white with a few Asian Americans. And when my Black friends invite me to something, I'm one of maybe 2 white women who are there. Like we literally, even though we live in a very diverse majority people of color region and a majority people of color state, we're still so socially segregated. And that's how I think that we really, how we build this moment into a movement is by getting to know each other. And I'll post in the chat my favorite essay of all time, Age, Race, Sex, and Class, Women Redefining Difference by Audre Lorde, where she says, our greatest problem as women is that we don't know how to relate across difference with each other as equals. We only know how to relate in hierarchy. So white is good, black is bad, straight is good, gay is bad, young is good, old is bad, all of these things. And that's at the end of the essay, she says, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Like, as long as we keep replicating this hierarchical way of relating with each other, we're never going to achieve victory in the revolution. We're never going to take down the patriarchy, because this is exactly what the patriarchy wants. They want us to hate each other and to harm each other and to hate ourselves. So I think what has been so inspiring to me in this moment is to see the unity and the solidarity, and see like Mennonites out there protesting, and just like so many different people coming to the streets and demanding change. That is something I have never witnessed before in my life. So say it with your whole chest. I'm feeling it. So, person by person, then movement by movement. It happens over time, consistently. Consistency and modeling are key. We have to live it. That's it. We have to keep this conversation going, keep these connections going. And I'm going to post that in. I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Oh, I didn't know who you were throwing it to. Sorry. But I'm going to jump in. I couldn't hear who you were throwing it to. I'm sorry.
It's you, baby.
Okay. So no, I think one thing is knowing the history, understanding how and why the structures were built in the ways that they were built. There were structures that were put in place for so long that were intentionally put in place. And then understanding how that, just like you were saying, Karen, those things that if we keep going through those same motions, we're never going to dismantle any of those structures and systems that were put into place to oppress different groups of people. And so being able to look at why they were put in place, I mean, talking about redlining, if you think about things that were so recent as 40 years ago, and thinking about we're coming up on Juneteenth. That was just Juneteenth. That was just 100 years ago. That is not that long ago. And so we're still feeling the effects of, if you don't know what Juneteenth is, I'm gonna give everybody a task to look that up, because that's the other part. We have to, like Angela was saying, folks have to educate themselves. You can't, you have to stop relying on the folks who are going through. I can't feel everything and educate you. I have to be able to feel what I feel and live my life and learn, because I'm learning how to navigate every single day. When I wake up, I don't get to choose whether I'm going to be Black or not. I don't get to choose whether I'm going to show up in my Blackness. That is just a fact. And so thinking about how, if we're talking about how do we get other people to realize these things and act on it, stop being afraid to hurt your friends' feelings. If you are, your friends and your family members, if you are around somebody and they say something or do something, stop them in their tracks and let them know, no, that's not cool. I talk about my daughter a lot. She's, like I said, she's now 23. She was in high school in a time where, or junior high, when kids were starting to say everything was gay. And she would, she'd walk around the house. She's like, oh, that's so gay. I'm like, oh, no. That's what we're not going to do is that. And immediately, like, I think it took her 3 times to say it before I popped her in her lip. And she went on and told her friends, like, yeah, we're not going to do that. That's what we're not. But seriously, like stop being afraid to hurt people's feelings, because if we're afraid when somebody says something that is disparaging about another group of folks, then, you know, we're like, oh, I'm not going to hurt their feelings, but you're still letting all of that hurt and all of that trauma that has been there for so many years and so many generations exist for that other person. That's not okay. Fuck your feelings. I don't care about your feelings right now, because this is something that has to stop, and we have to take that approach. Because I think right now, I think about if we had folks that have been in the news recently, if George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, think about, for white people, if any one of those people had been a dog or a cat. Just think about that for a minute. I've never in my life heard a dog or a cat say, I am being mistreated, and all the dogs and cats like me are being mistreated. Please help us. But yet and still, there have been so many charges against people for hurting animals. There have been, people get all up in arms and they jump. And I'm not saying that it's right to hurt animals, but that is something people jump on. Let a Black person get killed, and they're like, oh, that kind of sucks. You know, there's not that same fever. There's not that same movement. And so when we have that same, and I think, Emily, you were saying, you were questioning, you know, how do people get those experiences? It's not until people have that same feeling. It is not until people feel like, wow, I feel just as upset, hurt, all of these emotions. I feel just as hopeless and frustrated and fearful as another group, that they're never going to get that. And so it's going to continue to thrive. One of the reasons we don't talk about polio or scurvy or rickets anymore is because, guess what? We don't have those issues anymore. And so if we have to keep doing the work, and that's, they found cures for those things and eradicated those things because they kept doing the work, and they kept doing the work, and they kept trying until they found what worked. And so if we're going to continue to have the conversations and continue to educate folks, that's the only way we're going to get through this. That's the only way we're going to keep moving, because keeping silent about it is really saying that it's okay. And we have to keep saying something. We have to keep doing something.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Kesha. And I also think that one last thing I would like to say is that let's not forget about COVID. I know right now our minds are off of it, which is to a weird time of relief, because we've been on a pressure cooker for 3 months. And now this happened, which I think was like the explosion of that pressure cooker. But let's not forget about essential workers. And let's not forget about the social disparity that we have in our country, because the people that have been the most vulnerable people in our community are our BIPOC communities, our Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? And then we can talk all the things that we can, guys. Like, we can spend hours here, but this is very tangible political work that needs to happen. And there's a lot of organizations doing that work. And we need to, you know, healthcare, right? Like, a lot of people that lost their jobs lost healthcare, right? How can we allow in a country that is a superpower in the world send that signal out to the rest of the world? And I just want to bring this conversation in a global sphere right now, because I think it's very relevant to understand what's at stake right now. So outside of this pandemic and this social revolution that we're going, we have climate change like knocking in our door. And I will tell you, like, if you go to New Orleans, if you go to Miami, and we were to have put a 0.5 inches of the sea level rising, the first people that are going to be hurting, guess who they will be? Guess who are going to be the first people hit by this? It's going to be our Black, Indigenous, people of color. So we need to be very careful and be very serious about this work of liberation of our communities, of our brown communities, because the more we continue to empower us, the more resilient we will be. And climate change is something that no one is talking about. And when it hits, again, because this pandemic was caused from the breakage of a link in our ecosystem, because we just been sewing our heads into our homes, buying our stuff, our lives, moving fast. We've never paid attention to the earth that takes care of us. So how can we ask for people to take care of another human when we have allowed for our own earth to be raped, right? So I think that, and now we're sending, by us allowing to have this sociopath as the leader of our nation, we have sent out a signal to places like Brazil, to the leadership all over the world that's making this is, I don't like to use the word genocide, but what's happening with some communities in India, in Brazil, in Indonesia, is called, in the Philippines, is cultural genocide. And they're saying, well, the United States is doing it too. You know, so I want to remind you the responsibility that comes with being Americans. Privilege in this country, and this is a beautiful country, and I strongly believe in our values as a society and our ancestors. You know, like segregation didn't happen that far away ago. Like, there's so much work to do, and we need to do it not just for the United States and our children, but the entire world is watching us. You know, so my only advice, guys, is that we need to vote like our lives are on the line, because they are. And I really want people to take this super seriously. And it's not just in November. We have elections happening all over, primary elections. So I just want to, I know it's a lot, but this is the one thing everyone needs to do.
I think we have a big responsibility to educate people about how all of those issues are connected. I think especially a lot of white people don't realize that. They don't connect the dots. And there's going to be a lot of white people that are going to think, you know, that once we just take care of this one issue with George Floyd, that there can be like a check, done, move on, this is over. And obviously we all know that it's far from over. And so I think definitely while we educate all of our family, friends, social circles on these issues of racial justice, we do also have to talk about climate justice and how it is absolutely connected. Everything you're saying is totally right. Vulnerable communities are going to be affected first. And we definitely do need to vote, like our lives depend on it.
Emily, as you were talking, you know, one of the things that I talk a lot about is how there's never been a generation of white Americans with as much to gain from dismantling systemic racism as white millennials, because you have been screwed over by systemic racism. So for example, the 2008 economic downturn caused by subprime mortgage lending, racist, directed to Black and brown communities, blew up the entire economy, made it so that you graduated from college into a really terrible job market. Then not only did Black and brown families lose all their money that they had saved up for those down payments, but BlackRock and Jared Kushner and them came in and bought up all those homes. And now all millennials have a really hard time buying homes because there's no homes to buy. You know, also mass incarceration harms white millennials because we've chosen to imprison Black and brown people and invest our public money in that instead of in our public university systems. So you have this crazy amount of student debt. There's so many ways that, one of the things that I'm really hopeful about is that this whole boomer leadership and that whole hashtag OK Boomer, I just hope that that translates to millennial and Gen Z political participation and that you vote the frickin' boomers out. But there is so many amazing Gen Z and millennial, you know, Ileana Omar and Ayanna Pressley and Joe Negus, and I could go AOC, I could go on and on, who've gotten elected. And so I hope that that will really inspire, because millennials surpassed boomers as the largest group in the electorate in 2019. And you're also the largest group in the workforce. So you have the capacity to transform everything just with the sheer size of your generations. So this is also an important part about reaching each other and educating each other. I just got that today, like these three, like, oh my God, total stereotype, like blonde women influencers from LA asked me to come on their podcast. They have like over, you know, 1 million Instagram followers. I'm like, please, please, let's not just influence each other to take selfies. Let's educate each other and make a movement. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Tied up in each other. I will never be free until you are free.
That's
you know?
right.
And this is the power of this moment. I think that's become clear. I think that the pandemic disproportionately impacted Black and brown people, but it and frontline workers, but it impacted everybody. We all had this transformative moment where we had to like sit and really contemplate our life and what we value and just how evil our society can be. And I think this is a great time for us to say, fuck this. We demand better than freaking, what's his name, becoming a trillionaire. What Bezos became a trillionaire, and the billionaire class added $438 billion to their wealth. And what did we get? $1,200?
The biggest looting of all, right?
The biggest looting of all was the corporations. And when they were saying, oh, they're out there looting, I'm like, burn that down. Because how long did Jamie Dimon sit there and say, oh, it's okay for police to murder Black people? I don't give a rat's ass. How many murders did that happen? But you better believe when they're out there burning down the Chase banks, he's going to pick up the phone and call Trump and say this shit has to stop, right? If that's what it takes, I don't want any human life to be lost. And I certainly don't want small businesses, run by community members to be burned down. But you want to burn down a Starbucks? I'm go for it.
Well, ladies, I am honored to be here with you all. Thank you so much, everyone who's been on this call. You're all contributing. It's just all contributing. And there have been some really important things presenced here. I want to just see if from our attendees, any pressing questions that you'd like to present to the group. We'll take just a couple of minutes, answer 1 or 2 questions from our attendees. So just put a question in the chat. Someone's just mentioning the Seeing White podcast. Keisha, that's you. Phenomenal podcast. You want to know about the roots of whiteness, white supremacy, racism. You want to have, your heart is going to break, and it's going to be a good thing because it's going to break open.
Like going back to the 15th century, race is a social construct. And if we can get folks to understand that race is a social construct, and my final thought, I guess, would be understanding that the trauma that comes along with being a person of color and all of those things that are believed to be genetic in the way our health makeups are not genetic. They are the result of many, many, many years of systems that have worked together to put things into our lives for us to perform in the foods that we eat and what we had access to, what we were able to have in our areas, so that then that became a way of life and led to certain health issues for that particular group. It was causation, not genetics.
Does anyone else have anything closing comments or just something you want to share? We're gonna share some resources. We'll send a follow-up email, share some resources with you. I also, wanted to present a couple of organizations that we're donating to. You may want to support them as well if you have some extra on hand to support. Yeah, just in completing the conversation, any last thoughts from our crew here, our table of powerful women? I love y'all.
The resource that I was going to share is an e-course that was created by the company I work for, the Next Big Idea Club. Normally behind a paywall, but we've made it free to everybody right now. And it's an e-course based on the book Biased by the Black author and Stanford psychology professor Jennifer Eberhardt. And it's about implicit racial bias and what we can do about it and how we can make sure that implicit racial bias doesn't turn into prejudice. And I think it's a really good resource, especially possibly for white people to share with their, moderate friends and family members who, don't know where to start with all this and don't understand bias and don't understand how it's actually affecting everybody every day. So I highly recommend that people check it out and share it.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll have a link to that in the follow-up email. Angela Del Sol.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. And I wanted to share the resource of the Sunrise Movement. Back at the United Nations, we created this group maybe now 5 years ago. And it's an incredible coalition of young activists that are really putting pressure on politicians to think about social justice, environmental justice, and all of these topics. And they're super young, and right now they're struggling. I think everyone is really struggling because a lot of them are graduated this year, and they are just going into the world, into this crazy world. So if you guys could donate, it would be great, just because that allows for a lot of the activism to happen. And if you guys ever just want to have any conversations about or interested in land sovereignty and the intersectionality of indigenous rights with race, with culture, please reach out to me. I'll give you my Instagram and my email. And I'm just very honored for the opportunity. And I know that this is a really intense time, so I really hope everyone is taking time to take care of yourselves. This is not a race, and the emotional stress of this is very real. So I don't want anyone to think that what's happening is not extremely traumatic for all fronts. Like the pandemic and this is very traumatic. So I urge you to please be super gentle with yourselves and rest and set boundaries, right? Like sometimes you just don't have the emotional bandwidth, and it's okay.
Yes, thank you. And take care. Get enough sleep, drink enough water, take a social media TV break, put the news on pause for a couple of days. Like really if you have the opportunity to get some snuggles in with someone that you love, who loves you, get some snuggles in, or like I cuddle with a pillow at night, since that's who I'm snuggling with at the moment. But whatever it takes, right? So before, okay, we've got do you ladies have time for a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a question from dear sister of mine out on the West Coast, Sarita, and she's asking, okay, so there's a magazine called Womankind. They deleted and blocked her for asking whether they stand with their Black sisters. What is a constructive way to enlighten white fragility?
Do you want me to take that one, or who wants to take it?
I actually was going to say, I think like Karen talked about, so I'm going to let you, because you talked about it earlier. I mean, you did. I was going to exactly say, like Karen talked about earlier, so go right ahead and take that.
I would say I would write about it. You know, I would post something to Medium about it and call them out and call them in. You know, you don't. I how can I put it? I think there's call out culture that can be caustic and destructive, and I think there's a way to use public education in a way that can reach people and make your case. And I think the more you can root it in, you know, I asked you to do this and your response was to block me, and this is how that made me feel, and this is what you're communicating to the world, and this is what your community is like as a result, and this is not what we need right now. So you're not like, how can I put it, there's a way to like bring them in a way that will help. Not, maybe they won't even hear you, right? Maybe they just don't give a shit, but other organizations will see that and be like, oh wow, I hadn't really thought about that, and she's right, and I'm change my ways.
You know, I love that. You gotta, you know, we can put people on blast. We can put organizations on blast, right? Like we can do it in a way that's like, look, you know, this is what it is. It doesn't have to be destructive, but it can be constructive and putting something out there. I've learned a lot this week. I'm connected with Rachel Rogers. We met through, or I got connected with her on social media through a program that we both did, a online business program. And, you know, she is holding white women accountable and white people accountable. And it's been powerful to see that, you know, and it's like, okay, you know, so one of the things that's like that we can really do is speak up. Say, when you see something, say something, you know. I get intimidated by the conversation because I'm not like a collegiate person or well-read on the topics of feminism and racism and things of that nature. However, I am who I am. And so I just know I need to be in this conversation. So even though I might not understand all the lingo and all the terms and the, you know, half of it goes over my head, I'm still going to be here and speak up and say something, because we all know at the end of the day when something is not right. And so, so I'm just going into some quick takeaways here. Another big one is take responsibility. Okay. Like when I had a conversation with a Black friend of mine in the UK this weekend, and in retrospect, I was like, I think I leaned into her a little too much. I think I leaned on her. And so I followed up and I was like, look, and she may not feel that way. I don't know, but I felt that way. I was like, I think I leaned on her, and that's not cool, you know? So I took responsibility for it. So we can always do that. We're gonna fuck it up. You know what I mean? We're gonna say the wrong thing. We're gonna piss somebody off. And we can always say, hey, I realized that didn't work. And I don't feel good about that. And I'd like to make amends with you, you know? And then, like Angela Del Sol was saying, stand for something. Stand for something. You know, what is your cause? What's your mission? What are you going to choose? It could be something really like, you know, straight in front of you. It could be on your block or in your home or in your neighborhood, and it could be worldwide and everything in between. So choose something and stand for it, and play in that energy for a month or a year or 10 years, you know. And then, you know, this is transformation time. This is the global shakeup that we've needed. So here we are. What are we going to do with it? What do we want to do with it? How can we keep creating so that so that we're healing the 7 generations past, and we're setting up for the 7 generations forward in a super powerful way. I love y'all. I am so incredibly grateful for this conversation. We will do more. Everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much. Karen, did you want to share any last thoughts before we sign off?
Just love and unity and solidarity. Thank you so much to these incredible women. Oh my God, Laura's like, I think we just got to do this. I'm like, Laura, man, I am so freaking slammed right now. I can't even like do whatever. And she's like, it's okay, I'll just make it happen. I'm like, thank you, Laura. We needed to have this time. We needed to have this space. I'm so grateful to everybody who tuned in, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, Angela and Keisha and Emily. I'm just blown away by how deep and rich this conversation was.
Absolutely. And what I want to just share for perspective is that I text Angela Del Sol yesterday. I'm like, kind of cutting this close. I mean, literally, it was like 24-hour planning time. Okay. So this was like a seed of something that was pulling me forward so hard that it didn't matter. I was like, well, fuck it. We might just be the speaker. It might just be us, but it was that energy pulling forward. So you can do it. You can create and launch something and have 30, 40 people on the line live and having an impactful conversation and bringing people together in community, which we all need right now. And it doesn't have to be some big, grand, planned out thing. Let's be agile, let's be lean, let's get it going, because you put it out and then you realize, oh, wait, I could do this next time and I could do that and whatever. So, here we are in life. I love and honor each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here. We'll follow up with, resources and links to everyone so that you know how to find everyone who's on the call today, and you can follow them. I know for certain everybody here is sharing some powerful, thought-provoking, impactful stuff online. I've been reading a lot of Angela Del Sol's stuff. Just like, it's like blowing my heart and mind wide open. And seeing Emily hold like family members accountable who are, this and that, trying to, anyways, let's just be about it. Let's be about ourselves and each other and just coming together, and, we're on the path. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Love y'all.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Keisha. Thank you, Angela Del Sol.
Thank you all so much.
This was lovely. Thank you so much, Laura.
Have a beautiful night, everybody. Stay safe, stay blessed. Be in touch soon.
Okay.